time we get started this morning. A little late. Oh, I'm early? Ray said I was on time. You better take it up with Ray. Ray disagrees with you on that. Peggy, Ray disagrees with you on that. Today we're going to be going through Revelations, or Revelation, get chastised by Brent, 17 through 19, part of 19. We're not get all the way through it. And I've entitled this, The Prostitute and the Beautiful Bride, which, when you hear that, it's obviously a contrast. I mean, a huge contrast. And that's kind of what the whole point of this lesson is today. You know, in this age, this day and age, we've learned to dress up words and images and ideals so that they sound less offensive. They're less prejudicial. They're less, maybe even more appealing. So we change words to make it easier for us to use. And John in chapter 17 doesn't do that, okay? He doesn't dress up his words at all. He calls out exactly what he sees and what he hears in his vision. And one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters. With her the kings of earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth have intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." And then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. And there I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She had a golden cup in her hand, filled with the abominable things and filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery. I want to go past that. We'll come back to that. Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. And I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. And when I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because it once was, now is not, and yet will come." So, when we talk about people who choose to sell themselves on the open market, we use words that make us comfortable, maybe even whimsical. We say ladies of the night, courtesans, escort, minx, coquette, madam. None of those sound very offensive. However, John doesn't do that. I mean, think of the movie Pretty Woman. They kind of dress up this whole concept of what John is talking about. We don't like using the less attractive words like streetwalker, hooker, prostitute, harlot, or the real nasty word whore. And yet if you look in some of the translations, those 3 words are used. Prostitute, harlot, and whore are used to describe Babylon. Let's go back. I want you to see this. The word itself is pornes, and it only occurs 2 times in the Bible, or in the New Testament. And the first time is in 1 Corinthians 6:15. And if you notice, in every case, it's translated, or in every version, the New American Standard, the King James, and the International, it's translated either prostitute or harlot. However, in Revelation, it goes harlot, whore, prostitute. So he uses a much harsher word, and I think that's intent John's intent is to de-glamorize any possibility of who Babylon is. It's an absolute filthy thing, and he's wanting us to understand that. Does anybody else, any other version have a different word than those three? That's the only three I could find. Nobody? I looked through several versions, and those are the three I found. So why would he do that? Why would John equate a word such as that to Babylon? It was a sinful city. So's Tacoma. Yes, sir. Okay. Idolatry worship oftentimes also dealt with sexual things with temple prostitutes, male and female. And so fornication was a very big part of idolatry. I have allergies, so talking is tough for me right now. Doesn't hurt, but boy, can I not talk. Yes, ma'am. Don't you hate that?
Yes. Your question again was?
My question was, why might he use such a harsh translation?
Okay. So, he didn't want it clean. He didn't want it clean. He wanted it very direct. And all of mankind is the bride of Christ. And anyone who goes and worships in any other way is an adulterer, a prostitute, a whore.
Okay. So what she said is, we are all children of God, and God's ideal for his creation is fidelity, okay? Being faithful to him. That's not just us, but the entire creation. He wants it to be faithful to him. And what is the opposite of faithfulness is unfaithfulness, which is basically fornication and doing things that are anti-God. N.T. Wright, when he was writing his commentary on this, he says, "I apologize for these nasty words." When he talks about the goblet in which she holds, what's in the goblet that she's holding? That this prostitute is holding. What's in that goblet? Blood. Okay. He said that in actuality, he said what we need to get in our mind is that it's more than just blood. It's blood, urine, and dung. And he said, I'd use nastier words if I could, but he said, John is trying to convey to us that what is in her cup is the filth of that nation and all the filth that was brought about by what Rome has done, or as he keeps saying, Babylon. Why does John use the image of the whore to display Babylon? Okay, people would understand what a prostitute was, right? They understand what that is. Why else would he have used it?
I think it was okay, so Babylon was a large part of the Jewish history because they were conquered and taken from them. And then some of the people who were in captivity adopted the religions of Babylon, and some of them went back.
Okay,
But they
very
are
good.
a great conqueror, and they had a lot of evil in their worship.
Very much the way Babylon was with their idolatrous worship and the ways they treated the saints, being the Israelites, the way they treated them, the killing them, torturing them, making them slaves, is very much what's happening now in Rome. And so in John's eyes, the comparison's the same. And so when he's speaking to these seven churches, who many of them are coming from the Jewish religion or Jewish background, they understand that when he says Babylon, they get this vision in their head of all the things that their ancestors have told them about Babylon, the things that their families went through and all those horrible things. But this whole book is about the Creator and his creation. And Babylon using this word is very similar, or is a probably the darkest parody that John can use. It's kind of like when he describes Satan. He uses three numbers. He uses 666, or actually it's one number, 666. It's not 666. But we talked a little bit about that last week. Why did he use that number? Well, it's complete incompleteness is what it is. That's what he's talking about. This is totally incomplete. Whereas 777 would be total completeness. Okay? And then, I don't know if I mentioned it last week, but 888, what is that? What does that refer to? It's one greater than 7, okay? Who is greater than the 7? God created the world in 7 days, okay? Right? Who is greater than the 7? Jesus Christ himself is. And so then in their time, they took the number 8 to refer to Jesus, all right? And in fact, if you take his name and using the letters that they used and adding numbers to those, it adds up to 888, okay? So interesting, is it a coincidence? Dan and I have this running joke about coincidences in Revelation. Boy, isn't that a coincidence? There are no coincidences. I mean, it is intended to be that way. And so, just as incompleteness, 666, and total completeness, 777, when he talks about the church, when he talks about the children of Israel, what word does he use? What does he call them? And you said that. The bride. It's my bride, okay? When he talks about Rome and Babylon, what word does he use? Prostitute, okay? Complete opposite of what they are. One, fidelity, the other, totally unfaithful, all right? Also, one of the greatest images of Israel in the Old Testament comes from Hosea. What do we know about Hosea? Married Gomer, who was a prostitute, okay? And why did he do that? God told him to do that. Why? Yes, sir. Okay, why?
So that might be like a prophetic, how Jesus brought us back.
Okay, so it's prophetic, showing the love of God is really what it is, right? That no matter what we have done, no matter how unfaithful Israel has become, okay, in chasing other gods and chasing other things, God still loves his people. In fact, in Hosea, he says at one point he's ready to, to be done with her. And God says, no, go get her, woo her back, take her into the wilderness, woo her back, win her love back. Now, that's a tough thing to even think about, all right? Yes, sir.
She was also bought by him on the slave block when she was not as valuable as she was ordinary. So, like us, Jesus paying the price for us when we were worthless.
Yeah.
At that point, we were worthless.
Exactly. So you look at Hosea and you see you and I there, right? We see the whole of Israel, the whole of the church in Hosea when he talks about the way that Hosea and Gomer, their relationship. And so that's another reason that he uses this whole concept of the prostitute. Also, Rome actually thrived on this, on sexual immorality. Prostitution was a major thing in their country. And so it was, it was a very abominable thing to God's sight. And so that's something that he identified them to, is that they're people that, deal with prostitutes and illicit things. And then he also uses, he also talks about how Babylon's oppression is very contrary to who Rome presents himself to be. Who did Rome present themselves to be to the world? The light of the world, literally. They call themselves the light of the world. The Enlightenment. We have everything here. We have the best of this and the best of that. And yet, prostitution ran rampant through their thing. And so it's ironic that that would be the thing that John pulls on to say, this is really what identifies you. A comment from one of my sources says, this terrifying multi-layered denunciation of the outwardly delightful and inwardly deceitful city ought to give us pause for serious thought to all of us who live within today's glossy Western culture. In other words, this isn't just talking about Babylon, Rome. This is talking about any culture, any country where these things have gotten to that point. Do we see that here? Do we see that in this country? Most certainly. And this calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen. 1 is, and the other has yet to come. But when he does come, he must remain for only a little while. The beast who once was and now is not is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. That was clear as mud, wasn't it? We'll come back to that. The 10 horns you saw, and here, for the first time in John, we see him explain to John what he's talking about. All the other times we talk about all the symbolism, here the angel's going to say, let me explain it to you. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have yet to receive a kingdom, but who for not 1 hour will receive authority as kings among the beast. And they have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. And they will wage war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will triumph over them, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. And then the angel said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their heart to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand over to the beast their royal authority until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. So for 16 plus chapters, we've been dealing with all sorts of symbolism and speaking about the Creator and Jesus and Satan, the saved, the lost. And now, in an unusual step, he actually tells us what he's talking about in this case. And he says, first of all, I'm talking about Rome. How do we know it's Rome? Anybody ever been to Rome? Okay. What do they tell you about Rome when you're there? It's built on 7 hills, okay? So it's very distinct. It's very distinct. I've never heard that about any other city. It's built on 7 hills. Los Alamos, New Mexico is built on, I think, 3, okay? This one is built on 7. And when you go there, they're proud to point that out. And so it was very obvious who he's talking about. Then he talks about 7 kings. He says there's 7 kings, 5 which have come, 1 that is, and 1 to come. Well, what does that mean? What is all that about? And then he says, there's going to be an 8th. There's going to be an 8th king who once was and now is not. Interesting wording there. A lot of the scholars have gone back trying to figure out who each one of these kings were, and if you do that, you've got to go back very far back before any of John was written. Several kings, I think it's like 5 kings before John even writes Revelation. And so you can do that and try and figure out who each is, but it really doesn't fit because there's more than 7 kings. And so What is he talking about? Christopher Davis, who writes one of the commentaries on Revelation, he suggests that, like most of the book, he's talking again in symbolism. These numbers are symbolic. They're not actual number 7 kings in reality. He's saying they're apocalyptic numbers. 7 is the symbolic number for what? Completeness. It's complete, okay? So if he says there's 7 kings, what is he saying? All the kings of Rome, okay? I'm speaking about all the kings of Rome. But then it gets a little bit more confusing when he says 5 have fallen. What does that mean? 5 have fallen.
Died and conquered.
Yeah, 5 of them are gone. 1 is, okay, what would that be? The current king. 1 is. So at this point, what Christopher says is you have the 5 and the 1, which gives you 6. And what is 6? It's incomplete, okay? It's incomplete, okay? So he's saying not all the kings have come yet. Not all the kings have made it yet. We're talking only the ones so far. And that makes sense to me. Now, is he correct? I don't know. There's so many different versions of people that think these things, but to me this makes the most sense. And so this 6th emperor is the emperor while John is writing Revelation. And then he talks about the 8th, who belongs to the 7. I mean, it just gets a little bit more confusing. The 8th emperor belongs to the 7 emperors. Well, what is that? What was the number 8 we just talked about? Christ. Now, is he talking about Christ being one of the emperors? No, not in this format at all, right? He's not talking about that. However, there was a king or an emperor who came along who said he was God. Okay? Domitian himself said, I am God. You will worship me. I'm God. And I demand people worship me, and those who do not worship me will be put to death, which is what he did to the Christians, okay? Which we see about the goblet with the blood of the saints, okay? She's drunk with the blood from the saints. They were persecuting and killing Christians. Domitian was one person who could identify with this 8th. Also, we talked a little bit last week about Nero, what's the second word? Redivivus? I don't know how to say it. Nero reincarnated, basically. They believed, or they had a rumor going around and a belief going around that Nero died in 69 AD, that he came back to life. Why would they think that? Why would they think Nero came back to life? Well, he was God, but what would give him indication that he was back to life? Well, maybe somebody saw somebody that looked like him. Or the things that Nero was doing have returned at a much higher pitch than even Nero was doing. Nero was a horrible person. I mean, Nero was basically insane. He burned down Rome, okay? He blamed the Christians for burning down Rome and then put them to death for doing so. I mean, the guy was not a nice guy. And then continued to go after Christians throughout the rest of his life. So when they see somebody like Domitian come along, who is doing exactly the same thing, they say, it's Nero, he's back, okay? He's come back to life. And so that's kind of the concept of who they are. And so I think the explanation that Christopher comes up with is a pretty good explanation of who the kings are, okay? The next one doesn't define who are the 10 horns. The 10 horns. Tells you. They're also kings. Are they kings of Rome? No. There are many kings that served Rome, okay? Think about in Jesus' time, okay? Who was Jesus brought before? Was he brought before a king? Yes, he was. How about the apostle James? Was he brought before a king? Yeah. Okay. Were they doing their bidding or were they doing Rome's bidding? They were doing what Rome was having them do, and that was destroy Christianity as much as they could. Okay, and so these 10 are the people or the kingdoms that are subservient but serve, okay, Rome and do their bidding. And so that's what he's talking about. He says, you know, this is these lesser kings of various nations. What's interesting is when he says that these 10 kings, okay, are going, which basically are going to, or which is the beast, okay, on the beast. And by the way, this beast is the same beast we talked about before. Most scholars believe it's the same beast, 7 heads, 10 horns. Now we know what color it was, okay? It's scarlet red. It's going to destroy the prostitute. Now think about this. The beast is going to kill the prostitute. Who is the prostitute? Rome, right? Or Babylon. So the beast is going to kill Babylon. Who is the beast? Babylon. What? The beast is going to kill the prostitute. The prostitute is the beast. They're the same. So what is he trying to tell us there? Who destroyed Rome in reality? Rome. Rome destroyed themselves. Who's destroying our country? Is it an outside force? No. No, we are falling apart from within, okay? Not from without. We're strong from without. All our military uniforms and stuff, woohoo, you know, we're tough. We can take on anybody. But within, we are degrading. And that's what happens. And he says that it's a self-destruction from the power of evil. We see power at work in individuals every day. Look around. Look at those who center their lives on alcohol, drugs, illicit sex, hatred, violence. Often destroy themselves by their sinful behavior. And if you want to see why all that occurs, go to Romans, the first chapter, verses 18 through 32. Romans 1, 18 through 32, and we won't go through it, we don't have the time. But verse 24 of that says, "Therefore God gave them over to their sinful desires of their hearts, to sexual impurity for the degrading of their bodies with one another." Down to verse 28. "Furthermore, as they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, so God gave them over to depraved mind so that they'd do what they ought not be done." That's who our God is. So as it is with individuals, so it was with empires. One of the ways that God exercises his righteous judgment is by letting us have our free will, letting us and nations do what we want. And if we do choose the wrong things, then we go down the wrong path and we are destroyed. Chapter 18, "And after this I saw an angel coming down from heaven, and he had great authority, and the earth was illuminated by his splendor. With a mighty voice he shouted, 'Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling for demons and a haunt for every impure spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for unclean and detestable animal, for all the nations who have drunk the maddening wine of her adulteries. The kings of earth the kings of earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries.'" Man. "Then I heard another voice in heaven say, 'Come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues. For her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her crimes. Give back to her as she has given. Pay back double for what she has done. Pour her a double portion from her own cup. Give her as much torment and grief and as the glory and luxury she gave herself in the heart she boasts. I sit enthroned as a queen. I am not a widow. I will never mourn. Therefore, in one day her plagues will overtake her. Death, mourning, and famine. She will be consumed by fire, for mighty is the Lord God who judges her. There we go. And they will, back one. And they will say, or when the kings of earth who committed adultery with her and shared in her luxury see the smoke of her burning, they will weep and mourn over her, terrified at her torment. They will stand far off and cry, woe, woe to the great city, you mighty city Babylon. In 1 hour your doom has come. The merchants of earth will weep and mourn over her, because no one buys their cargoes anymore, and cargoes of gold, silver, precious stones, and pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet cloth, every sort of citron wood, and articles of every kind made of ivory and costly wood, bronze, iron, marble, cargoes of cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, and frankincense, of wine and of olive oil, fine flour and wheat, and cattle and sheep and horses and carriages, and human beings sold as slaves. And they will say, the fruit you longed for is gone from you. All your luxury and splendor have vanished, never to be recovered. The merchants who sold these things and gained their wealth from her stand far off, terrified at her torment. They will weep and mourn and cry out, woe, woe to the great city, dressed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and glittering with gold, precious stones and pearls. In 1 hour such a great wealth has been brought to ruin. Every sea captain and all who travel by ship, the sailors and all who earn their living from the sea will stand far off. And when they see the smoke of the burning, they will exclaim, was there ever a city like this great city? They will throw dust on their heads with weeping and mourning and cry, woe, woe to you, great city, where all who had ships on the sea became rich, because through her wealth, in 1 hour she has been brought to ruin. Rejoice over her, you heavens. Rejoice, you people of God. Rejoice, apostles and prophets, for God has judged her with the judgment she imposed on you. And then a mighty, And then a mighty angel picked up the boulder the size of a large millstone and threw it into the sea and said, with such violence, the great city of Babylon will be thrown down, never to be found again. The music of harpists, musicians, pipers, and trumpets will never be heard again. No worker of any trade will be found in her again. The sound of the millstone, sticky fingers, will never be heard in you again. The light of the lamp and will never shine in you again. The voice of the bridegroom and bride will never be heard in you again. Your merchants were the world's important people. By your magic spell, all the nations were led astray. In her was found the blood of prophets and of God's holy people, of all who have been slaughtered on the earth. Whoa. Okay. Did you get his point? Did you get the point that he was trying to make here? What's he trying to tell us about Babylon? It's going to be like, Rome is going to be like Babylon, and as Peggy says, it's done, okay? It's done, all right? We're through with you. I'm going to now pass judgment on you. It's over. You've had your chances. Does God do that to us as people? There's always a chance, okay? If you want the chance. But so oftentimes what happens with people is they keep turning away God and turning away God, that chance goes away. And God finally says, it's time for you to come home. It's time for, your life is over now. You made those decisions. I gave you every opportunity. It's time for you to come home. And that happens to us. Again, so much of what John writes can be found in the Old Testament. Jeremiah 50 and 51 is very reminiscent of the oracle given to Babylon about their destruction. And then the lament of the idolatrous, all these people who are ship captains and people who made their money off of Rome, can be found in Ezekiel 27 in the idolatrous Tyre. The kings of earth, all these merchants, they all shared in Rome's idolatry, her unfaithfulness to God. They took part of it, and they say, well, they weren't part of all of it. I mean, I didn't do those things. I just made money off of her. And it's a lesson for us that it's wrong to make money off of things that are unholy. Those things that are contrary to God's law, we should not be trying to make money off of those. And I'll probably be getting in trouble for this, but I worked in a convenience store, and what I noticed about that is it's something I could never own personally. Why? Because they get their money from 4 things. 90% of their money come from 4 things: alcohol, tobacco, lottery tickets, and gasoline. Now, I can sell the gasoline, but what part do I have doing the other 3? Well, I'm not drinking. I'm not doing the drinking. I'm not doing the smoking. But we're offering it to the world, okay? We as Christians have to make decisions that say, look, I'm above doing things that are contrary to God's will. And so making money, yeah, that's a good thing. God doesn't say we shouldn't make money. God doesn't say that we can't even be rich, okay? But what God does say is be pure, okay? And you dip your toes in something that's dirty, how pure are you? You're not. You're no longer pure. And so that's what God is telling these merchants. He's saying, look, yeah, you guys are all upset about it, but you're just as guilty as Rome is because you took part in everything that they were taking part in. And so he tells the Christians to come out of them. What is he telling them? What is he telling the Christians that are in Rome when he says, come out? Leave. What did he tell Lot when Lot was in Sodom? Leave. Okay? And what did Lot want to do? Stay. He negotiates with God. Well, come on, God. How about 10? I mean, how about 100? How about, all the way down to 10, right? It's really not that bad. We're doing okay here. But read about his sons-in-law. Okay? His daughters were going to marry these 2 men. What kind of men? Were they holy men? Were they men that you want your daughters to marry? We never talk about them. But no, they were not. Okay? Because they were polluted. And so God says, come out. Don't be part of that. And so there's a constant danger confronting us to be seduced by our society, by the things in our society, the things that look appealing to us. Of all the things that he talks about and all the trades and stuff, notice the very last trade item that he talks about. What was it? People. And the word translates better, according to one of the scholars, to not people, but to bodies. Because they had no identity. Okay, they were so invaluable, okay, or so devalued that they had no, they're just a body. That's all they are. So as much as 1/3 of Rome at this time was made up of slaves. 33% of their population was slaves. Okay? And they were brought there for what purpose? So that the people of Rome could live more luxuriously and be happier. They were just bodies. And I'm not going to get to 19, by the way. That's for Jim. In verse 20, he says, for God has judged her with the judgment she imposed on you. And that's a reference to the application of the law of malicious witness. Anybody know what that is? The law of malicious witness? It's in Deuteronomy 19, 16 through 19. And I bet you most of you have said this or thought this. about this law, even though you may not know what it says. But basically it says that it demands that if a man is found to have given false testimony against his brother, he would be punished with the very punishment that was intended for his brother to suffer. Think about that. So these people who accuse others and they're just making up stories, they would serve that same sentence. Yes? Law of malicious witness. Yeah, law of malicious witness, Deuteronomy 19:16 through 19. Okay? And we've seen people bring malicious charges against people that hold no weight. And they get off scot-free, or they might get perjury and maybe a slap on the wrist. But what if they, knowing that you're going to testify against somebody, say that they were a murderer, which the judgment would be death, or the sentence would be death. If they found out that you were lying about that, you received death for that. There'd be a lot more truth-telling, I would think, in our law systems if we were to do that. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time. I will not be here next week to finish this class. I'm going to dump that on Jim. The next chapter, chapter 19, well, we talked about all the punishment and all the bad things about Rome today, or Babylon as he calls it. Chapter 19 takes a swing. It's going to take us into the fifth time to talk about the end of time. The fifth time that he goes into the end of time. And it's back in God's presence, and it's a glorious time again. He takes us from the dark to the glorious, and he does that throughout Revelation. Here's all the things that are going bad and the bad things of the world and what God's going to do to them. And then he brings us back to the throne room and says, rejoice. Know you're in my presence. Know that good things are coming for you. And he wants us to keep us centered on those good things. That's John's whole intent when he wrote this book. He's writing to 7 churches who are facing persecution on a daily basis. They can't market their goods. They have to worry about their lives. Their associations with family and friends are tainted because they are Christians. And he wants them to know that, yeah, life is tough. All these bad things are going on. But you know what? In the end, God has you. God has you in his grip, and he will deliver you. He won't deliver you here. Okay, we're not delivered here on earth. He'll deliver you when you pass. That's when our reward is. And sometimes we get very impatient to receive our reward.
Unless we are on our toes constantly, we tend to forget the good because we are so surrounded by
Peggy says, we tend to forget the good because we're so surrounded by the bad. And so we have to make a concerted attempt and challenge ourselves to daily look at the promises that God has given us and says that are already ours. These aren't something we earn. They're already ours. We already possess them. It's just that we don't collect yet. Okay? We will collect them, but not right now. And so we need to realize that. And so if I could convey anything to you about Revelation, it would be that study it. Go through it slowly. Understand the symbolism. Understand that it was talking to people to give them, the people of that time, and to us, to give us comfort. Not to scare us. Not to make us say, oh, these things are horrible. To focus on the presence of God and what God has done for you and I in the death of Jesus Christ. And so that would be my message to all of us as we close this up. Anybody have any final comments? There's a lot of what? Again, understand that even numbers within Revelations are symbolic, okay? You notice that he said everything's going to come to an end in a year, or I mean immediately over. It doesn't immediately over. Even when he says that about Babylon, that they're looking at this and they said, oh, it's all over right now. No, it's not until the 5th century, 410 AD, that Rome actually falls. That's a long hour. He says it's going to happen in an hour. Okay? God's time is not our time. We have to understand that. Okay? And we were talking before church, one of the beauties about this book that amazes me, and you get it if you just go through it more and more, is how relevant it was written in 95, 96 AD. How relevant it is today. The things he describes in it in 96 AD, they're the same today. They've always been the same. Things that, they say, well, and again, there's four lines of thought. And some of them think they're very specific things, and they can line them up to the Pope and to this, to the Reformation and all that. Do they fit those scenarios? Yeah, they do.
You can put different names, but it's still the same.
Okay? They fit those patterns. But that's the beauty of God's Word, is that He is the only one that could write a book in AD 96 that is still relevant today. And it still has examples that were relevant then that are relevant today. Nobody else can do that. Only God. And so, to me, it's one of the most fascinating books that we have just from that standpoint. And it teaches me just the wonder and the power of our Lord. So, thank you again for your participation. And next week, Jim is going to finish it out for you. Thank you.